On a summer day in 1928, the Budd family, living in Manhattan, New York, welcomed an elderly, polite-looking man into their home. He said he was there to offer their sons a job. With his gray beard, kind words, and trustworthy demeanor, he won the family's trust. He showed particular interest in little Grace. A few weeks later, he returned and said he wanted to take Grace to a birthday party. The family trusted this kind old man and let their 10-year-old daughter go with him. Grace was never seen again. 6 years later, a letter arrived for the family. What was written inside was the most horrifying thing the human mind could imagine. Albert Fish was perhaps the most disturbing serial killer in history, and this was just the beginning.
Albert Hamilton Fish was born on May 19, 1870, in Washington, D.C. At birth, his name was Hamilton Howard Fish, but he later took the name of a deceased brother and became Albert. He appeared to be from an ordinary family, but the reality was far from it. Mental illness was prevalent in the family. His uncle was manic, his brother was committed to a mental institution, and his sister had mental issues. Even Albert's mother experienced hallucinations. Albert's father was 75 years old when his son was born, and died when Albert was only 5. When his mother realized she couldn't care for 4 children alone, she sent Albert to an orphanage. But this was no ordinary orphanage. This was where Albert's darkest fantasies were born. At the orphanage, Albert was regularly beaten and tortured. Children were stripped and whipped in front of other children. But something strange began happening with Albert. He started taking pleasure from pain. He looked forward to being whipped, even enjoyed it. While other children cried, Albert smiled. This period completely twisted his psychology. Pain and pleasure had merged in his mind. At 12, his mother took him from the orphanage. But Albert was no longer a normal child. Violence and sexuality never left his mind. By 19, he had moved from Washington, D.C. to New York and began meeting male prostitutes in secluded places. But even this wasn't enough. He wanted darker things. In 1890, at age 20, he assaulted a child for the first time. It was a telegraph boy. He kidnapped him and tortured him for days. But he didn't kill him. He let him go. This was Albert's first serious crime, but it wouldn't be his last. Similar attacks continued for years. He particularly targeted black children because their disappearances went unnoticed. In 1898, at age 28, he got married. His wife was unaware of his bizarre behaviors. They had 6 children. From the outside, he was a normal family man, working, caring for his children. But when night fell, his true face emerged. Albert had begun inflicting terrible tortures on himself. He would take needles and insert them into his most sensitive areas, his groin area, perineal region, genitals. The greater the pain, the greater the pleasure he derived. Sometimes he pushed the needles in so deep that he couldn't remove them anymore. Dozens of needles remained in his body, rusting and causing infections. At the same time, he began writing disturbing letters. He wrote to people from newspaper ads. He targeted widows. In his letters, he described his darkest fantasies: cannibalism, torture, necrophilia. In a letter to one woman, he said he wanted to kill and eat her son. The woman went to the police, but Albert couldn't be caught. In 1917, his wife left him. She ran off with another man. She took Albert's children, too. This separation drove Albert to an even darker place. Now he had nothing to hide. He was going to start killing. Exactly how many children he killed is unknown. Albert himself said 100 children. Police thought this was an exaggeration, but at least 15 murders seemed certain. Albert particularly targeted children from poor families, black children, children of immigrant families. When they disappeared, there wouldn't be much investigation. His method was always the same. He would play the role of a kind old man. He would gain families' trust with job offers or party invitations. He would take the child away to a secluded place, an abandoned house or farm. Then he would begin. First, he would torture the child for hours, sometimes days. Then he would kill them. And the most horrific part would come. He would dismember the body, cook it, and eat it. Albert did this like a ritual. He would mix some body parts with vegetables and cook them. Human flesh is like lamb.
he would say later. Very tender, very delicious. Sometimes he would eat from the same body for days. He kept human flesh in his house, in places no one knew about. In 1924, he killed 8-year-old Frances McDonnell. The child disappeared while playing on Staten Island. Albert had caught him, strangled him, and buried his body in the woods. The family searched for months. When the body was found, his family was devastated, but police couldn't find any clues. 4 years later, a 4-year-old boy named Billy Gaffney disappeared. Albert had separated him from his brother, kidnapped him, and taken him to a farmhouse. What he did to Billy was one of the most disturbing details, Albert told police. He had tortured the child for days, then killed and eaten him. Small children are more tender, he had said during the investigation. But the case that made him truly famous was the Grace Budd murder. In May 1928, Albert saw a newspaper ad. A young man, Edward Budd, was looking for work in the countryside. Albert wrote to him, giving the name Frank Howard. He offered a job. When he went to the Budd family's house, he appeared kind, polite, and trustworthy. He wore a suit and had combed his gray beard. He immediately won the family's trust. 10-year-old Grace was at home. Albert showed special interest in her. A few weeks later, he returned. This time, he said he wanted to take Grace to his niece's birthday party. The mother hesitated at first, but she couldn't imagine this kind old man had bad intentions. She waited for Grace to get dressed and handed her little girl over to Albert. This was the last time they saw Grace. Albert took Grace to an abandoned house in Westchester County. This house, called Wisteria Cottage, was a place he had used for other murders before. When they arrived at the house, Albert told Grace to play in the garden. Then he went inside and undressed. He came outside completely naked. Grace tried to run away in terror, but Albert caught her. I won't detail here what he did to Grace, but what Albert later told police shocked even experienced detectives. He strangled the little girl, dismembered her body, and continued his perverse behaviors even after death. He took some body parts home and ate them for 9 days. For 6 years, no one could find Albert. Police had no clues. Grace's family was devastated, but Albert couldn't resist. In 1934, he wrote a letter to Grace's mother. This letter is perhaps one of the most disturbing documents in history. In the letter, he described in detail how he killed Grace, how he dismembered her body, and how he ate her. Your daughter was a virgin when she died, he wrote. He wrote about how he cooked each part, what vegetables he ate it with, how delicious it was. The letter's language was so casual, so calm, as if he were talking about a recipe. The family's suffering was a game to Albert. He took pleasure from their pain. But this letter was the beginning of Albert's end. Detective William King had been following this case for 6 years. When he examined the letter, he noticed a small detail. There was a faint stamp on the envelope. It read, NYPCBA -- New York, Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. Someone working in this association's office must have taken the envelope. King went to the association. He examined the records. A man had recently moved from here and left some papers behind. There were envelopes, too. The man was a janitor named Lee Sakichi, and they learned the man lived at 406 West 52nd Street. But when they went there, they couldn't find Albert. They left a note, if he returned, to come to the office for his checks. King was a patient man. He started waiting near the house. Days passed. On December 13th, 1934, an old man with a gray beard walked toward the house. King followed him. Albert was caught while climbing the stairs. He tried to defend himself. He had a razor in his hand, but King was faster. Albert was handcuffed. When taken to the police station, Albert confessed to everything. He said he had killed not only Grace, but Billy Gaffney, Frances McDonnell, and countless other children. He claimed to have killed over 100 children. He had victims in every state, every city. He told police the location of some bodies. He gave some families the chance to learn what happened to their children who had been missing for years, but most were never found. During Albert's confessions, psychiatrists examined him. They had never seen anyone like him. He had too many perversions to list: pedophilia, masochism, sadism, necrophilia, coprophilia, cannibalism. But the most surprising thing was that Albert saw all of this as completely normal. There was no remorse. no empathy, only his own pleasure.
When doctors x-rayed Albert's body, they were shocked. They saw 29 needles in his groin area. Some had been embedded so deeply they had merged with the flesh and rusted. Albert had been torturing himself for decades. Pain and pleasure were the same thing to him. The trial process began in 1935. Albert admitted his guilt but claimed he was insane. Psychiatrists were divided. Some said he was insane. Others said he was just perverted. But the jury saw that Albert had planned the murders, selected his victims, and hidden evidence. He was legally sane. He was sentenced to death. Albert's behavior during the trial was very strange. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he spoke like a religious man. "God told me," he said. "He said I needed to punish bad children." He talked about the story of Abraham sacrificing his son, but no one believed this. Albert was just a monster. God had nothing to do with him. On January 16th, 1936, he was taken to the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. He was 65 years old. He was calm before the execution, even excited. "This will be the last experience," he said. "I've never tried being killed by electricity." Even in his final moments, he was thinking about deriving pleasure from pain. The execution took place at 11:06 p.m. When the first electric shock was given, something strange happened. It short-circuited. The metal needles in Albert's body had interfered with the electricity. A second shock had to be administered. Albert Fish's death wasn't normal either, because of the tortures he had inflicted on himself. The Albert Fish case became an important study subject for psychology and criminology. There was no other case with so many perversions combined. The traumas he experienced in childhood, his family's history of mental illness, and the tortures at the orphanage had made him this way. But these couldn't be excuses. Albert had made conscious choices. He had selected his victims, made plans, and hidden evidence. The most disturbing point was that Albert lived undetected for years. His neighbors knew him as a kind old man. He sometimes babysat their children. He went to church. No one knew that he cooked human flesh in his house, that he had 29 needles in his body, that every night he harbored dark fantasies. Grace Budd's family never recovered. Her mother had a nervous breakdown after receiving Albert's letter. Learning what happened to their daughter was worse than not knowing. Edward Budd blamed himself for his sister's death. If he hadn't placed that job ad, Albert would never have found them. The families of Albert Fish's other victims experienced similar pain. Billy Gaffney's mother went insane. Francis McDonald's father started drinking. Families who had been waiting for their missing children for years were devastated when they learned the truth. And worse, if Albert's claim of 100 children was real, dozens more families never learned what happened to their children. Police never solved all of Albert's murders. Only 3 murders could be definitively proven. But Albert's detailed confessions clarified countless other cases. Bodies found years ago, unexplained disappearances. Albert Fish was behind many of them. The Albert Fish story shows us that appearances don't always reflect reality. Even the kindest, most trustworthy-looking people can harbor dark secrets. Families do everything to protect their children, but sometimes the greatest danger comes from the most unexpected place. Ignoring the signs from Albert's childhood was a huge mistake. The tortures at the orphanage should have been reported. His family's history of mental illness should have been considered. He should have been caught after his first attacks, but the system failed, and dozens of children paid for it with their lives. Today, Albert Fish is remembered as one of the most horrific serial killers in history. The Moon Maniac, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man, the Brooklyn Vampire. He has many nicknames, but his real nickname is the Living Devil, because what he did was the darkest evil humanity could imagine. Stories like these from the depths of darkness illuminate the darkest corners of human psychology. If you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to subscribe to the Mr. Shutter channel. Every week we research and present the most intriguing, mysterious, and disturbing true crime cases for you. By subscribing and turning on notifications, join us on this journey where the darkness never ends. See you at Mr. Shutter.